Happy New Year, everybody. It is the year 2020. So happy you guys are joining us on Mental Health Matters. Thanks for listening. This is Tom Duff, Executive Director of St. Louis Counseling. Check out St. Louis Counseling at Saint, spelled out, stlouiscounseling.org. That is stlouiscounseling.org. If you are searching for, well, just some information about mental health, looking for a counselor, looking for services, just looking to maybe educate yourself, go to that website, take a look around, and don't be afraid to come to us for some assistance. We're always here to help. So, this is Mental Health Matters, right? The first edition of 2020. So, we want to break down stigma. We want to make mental health okay to talk about. And we do that in a variety of ways. But one of the ways you can assist this podcast is by helping us share the word, right? So, share us on Facebook, share us on Twitter, share us on Instagram. Take that link in the website, put it in your email to all your contacts. Send that out. If one of these podcasts you like, download it. You can find us on any place you would normally find a podcast and share that. Download it. Become a subscriber. If you want to be a sponsor of this podcast, we are looking for sponsorship of this podcast to keep it going because we know we are making impact and we are helping people. Reach out to Debbie Dugan. Some people call her Producer Debbie. That person would be me. But check her out at ddugan, DDUGAN, at ccstl.org, or just go to that website and you'll see her link there as well too. So we're always looking for sponsorship, but ultimately, share it. Share the news, share the wealth, right? So as always, we have very entertaining guests on, and today's guest is no exception. This dude is a pretty cool cat, one of the coolest people in the St. Louis region. Some people call him Tommy D. Some people call him Duff Patty. Actually, it's just me. Hey, all that rhymed. How about that? So anyway, it's just me today, guys. Trying to bring a little humor to your worlds. But I wanted to start off 2020 with the podcast, just talking a little bit about this time of year. So you're going to hear a lot of stuff about resolutions, right? So we all know January 1st comes along and people are making their resolutions. And this podcast isn't necessarily about those today, but it is almost cliche on some levels that we all say we're going to lose some weight. It's always just a magical time of year about we're going to lose some weight. So, and that's about the physical part, the physical health side, but what about our mental health side, all right, when it comes to these resolutions? And sometimes we even feel pressured to have these resolutions, all right, and resolutions are basically goals and objectives. So, I'm going to challenge us to maybe look at this time of year, maybe not so much about a resolution, but maybe about it's a time of year where we should always give ourselves a mental health checkup, because sometimes that's what we're doing when we're making resolutions. So what do I mean by a mental health checkup? All right. So we all go get physical checkups, right? Yearly physical, annual physical, right? We should anyway. If you're not doing that, please go do that. Your doctors encourage it, and that's also just healthy. But let's think about if we were going to go to a trainer and we were going to have a checkup with for our physical side, right? Or we might just be doing this ourselves. So we might step on the scale. That's going to give us some data, right? So we're going to find what our weight is. And we probably should be writing these things down, right? We might look in the mirror, get just a glimpse of how we look, right? So maybe for the last 2 weeks, I decided this year I was going to eat as much as I could. I was going to weigh myself after I ate as much as I could. That way that number be really high. So then when I lost like 5 pounds afterwards, I'd feel so accomplished, right? But don't do that. That's not a good thing to do. But it might make myself feel a little bit better in a distorted kind of way. But so we're going to look in the mirror, right? See, are we bloated? How do we look? We're going to look at the tone of our muscles, right? Might look at our biceps. We might realize, wow, I've really lost muscle tone there and how I look. We might do measurements on those body parts, right? On our arms, our thighs, our waist, to give us that data on how after we then implement a strategy, how we could look afterwards. Hey, I lost 5 inches around my waist. I'm feeling so much better, right? We might examine what we are eating and what our habits are. Are we eating all junk food? And remember, this is this physical part of our health check-in, right? And what are eating habits? Are we eating late at night? Eating a bunch of carbs at nighttime? Are we doing any exercise? We're evaluating that in ourselves as well too. Maybe there's those body fat tools that you can use and plug those numbers into a formula. Like there's those things that pinch you on the tricep or on your back to figure out the how much skin is there and how much fat is there. Then the trainer puts that into a formula, and then it tells you have 4% body fat. Oh, that'd be amazing, right? But ultimately maybe it's more like 24%. So you're getting all that data, right? Then you're figuring out, can I do this all on my own, or it's overwhelming me and I need some help. Who do I turn to? So maybe you're turning to your gym and you're joining your gym. You've got your physical trainer that's coming to your house, but that would be that physical kind of check-in, right? So that'd be our ability to take a look at ourselves and our physical health and make some interventions. So I wanted to kind of put that out there first because if you've heard the podcast, you've also heard me talk about we have these two frameworks. We have our physical health and our mental health, all right? And so a lot of times we think so much about that physical side, and a lot of the same things apply to our mental side as well too. So what do I mean by a mental health checkup? What could that look like? Well, first of all, I'm going to ask you to turn off the outside noise. All right? So unplug, all right? So put your phone away. Take a few moments for yourself. Turn off the TV, turn off the radio. Don't turn off this podcast yet. But give yourself some time by yourself, all right? So if you have kids, maybe you can send them somewhere, or maybe this is when they're at school or they're in bed already, whatever it may be. But give yourself some quiet time, all right? So this mental health checkup, I want you to examine what you're eating and those habits. Same thing as the physical health side, right? Because we know that eating plays a part in our own mental health. I'm going to ask you to examine what kind of exercise you're doing because that's the same thing as physical health, but it also impacts our mental health as well too. All right? Why don't you pull a stress inventory off the internet and rate yourself? All right? Give yourself a baseline. These stress inventories, basic stuff, right? It might say within the last year, put a check mark next to any of these things that has accompanied your life, right? That's been part of your life. And it might have some points allowed to it. Or it might be, well, if you've had this many check marks, you would be underneath a lot of high stress. So, and that could be things like loss of a loved one. You moved, a new job. You had a change in your family, whether it be someone came into your family through a marriage or maybe somebody was divorced. But it's all just basic stuff because that gives you a baseline on what kind of stress level that you're having. I'm going to ask you to write down all the things you do to relax. What are your hobbies? What are the things you enjoy? I want you to take the time to write through those things and actually write them down. Not just think about them, write those things down. As with the other aspects too, your eating habits and your exercise. Write this stuff down. You might ask yourself a couple questions. Am I happy and content with my current state of life? My job, my relationships, my finances? So you've heard me talk about know thyself before. This is what we're doing. We're getting to know yourself a little bit here. So, but ask yourself those questions. Also, ask yourself, do I ever tell anybody my true thoughts and feelings? Do I bottle things up? Do I ever ask for help? Think about that for a minute. Do you ever really tell anybody your true thoughts and feelings? Of course, we always talk about, good, healthy relationships, having significant people in your life, whether it be a partner, a spouse, significant other, whoever it may be. Do you really tell them everything that you're thinking? That's really important. You got to be able to get things off your chest. Ask yourself, am I an optimist or a pessimist? Or am I a mixture of both? I believe we're always a mixture of both, but sometimes on the continuum, we might end up more on one side of that, on that side of that spectrum, right? Being an optimist or pessimist. We know research shows that the way you think impacts your daily functioning. But ask yourself that question and tell yourself why you think one way or another. What's getting in the way of what I want? All right, so think about that for a minute. We all think about how we can better ourselves, or like, oh, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. So when I'm talking about things getting in the way of that. I'm not talking about other people or your current situation. I'm talking about your personality or your behavior that may be impeding your life or your progress, right? Um, so figure that out and actually address that with yourself compared to like, well, I can't get ahead in my job because my boss is just this big jerk, right? But look at yourself, know thyself. Now I'm going to go a little deeper as well here too. All right. Is there a pattern of something about yourself, your personality, or behavior that's impeding your life? All right. Do you isolate? So this is when, like remember, right now you're giving yourself a mental health checkup, right? You're taking time for yourself. You have no cell phone going off. You're not looking at social media as you do this. The TV is not on in the background. So, do you isolate? Do you avoid situations? Analyze that with yourself. Do you cry a lot? Is there times where you just easily cry? Do you fixate on things and can't let them go? Do you have a role in damaging any relationships? So, taking some time to look at your relationships and realizing, wait a minute, what's my role in that? Is it always the other person's fault? Is it? Take a chance and take some time to look at that. Am I generally an unhappy individual? Right? So I'm asking you to look a little bit deeper because sometimes we look at patterns. And when it comes to our mental health, because we all have mental health, right? We're all up and down. We have an ebb and flow to that. But sometimes there might be some mental illness involved, right? A mental health concern, a mental health issue that's going on. And a few of those things I just said, do I isolate? Do I isolate? Do I avoid situations? Do I cry a lot? Do I fixate on things? I mean, those are kind of related to some mental illness. They could be related to depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive. It could be related to some up and down stuff with bipolar. Is your mood up? Is your mood down at different times of the day, of the year, of the month? Am I generally an unhappy person? Take a look at that. And if you can go back and say, wow, I've been like this for a really long time. I damage relationships. My inability to get out and enjoy life and I avoid people, that's really impacting who I am. Then maybe it's time that you can look towards counseling, right? So who do I turn to? Can I do this myself? So some of this mental health checkup, as you're going through here, you start looking at it as like, is there aspects of this that I can change this myself? I know I shouldn't be eating a bunch of junk food after 7 o'clock at night. Okay, I can stop that. All right. I know I sleep in a lot, but I really, if I set my alarm, then and I know I got to get to work, I know I can get up. But is it more of a case of I just sleep a lot? I can't get up. My alarm goes off and I can't do it. And I sleep and sleep and sleep. Those are signs that you should seek out some help. So first step of help may be just talking to someone that you have in your life. All right. Somebody you could trust, or you could say like, hey, I did this mental health checkup myself, and like some of these things are concerning. Do you see these things in me too? Or am I just beating myself up over this? So finding that person to talk to. If you don't have that person, a counselor, a therapist is a great person to go to. And there's nothing wrong with that. All right? That's what I'm getting at. Sometimes with our overall mental health, we can make change ourselves. But then sometimes we need to go to that outside, third party, objective listener that will help you. All right? So don't be afraid to do that. If you want to test the waters, test them at St. Louis Counseling, stlouiscounseling.org, right? But you can also test the waters with some friends, some loved ones, some significant others that you feel you have that trustworthy relationship to do. So, I've kind of talked about this physical way of checking in with yourself, but my big focus have been the mental health checkup. This time of year, you could give yourself that mental health checkup. Now, I'm a proponent in doing this, all the time, trying to improve yourself all the time. But if we could look at resolutions as a way of like, hey, yearly I give myself a mental health checkup, do it. Make that, instead of saying resolutions, saying yourself you're going to give yourself a mental health checkup. Or if that bothers you, call the resolution, but do some of those things I said. But why do I want you to do this stuff, right? I'm the dude that's a cool cat in the St. Louis region, right, that operates this podcast. And you don't even know me. Some of you know me, right? And hopefully every one of my friends is sharing this, because if you're not a friend. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But there's a reason I want you to do this, all right? I want you to take care of your own mental health because it helps others out, whether you realize it or not. Life is stressful. How do we not let those stressors take over? When I asked you about the mental health checkup, about what relaxes you, make a list of all those things that you're currently doing. Hopefully you have quite a few things on that list. And if not, you need to add some things to that list. Because what happens when life is stressful, the job is stressful, certain things go. And those certain things are our relaxation. All right. We allowed all those intrusive thoughts to come in about work. We don't go work out because we're stressed out, and we avoid it because it takes energy. Because stress sucks the life out of us sometimes and our energy. And it's a lot easier to go sit on a couch in front of a TV instead of going to do some exercise or a hobby that provides release of those bad chemicals inside the brain. So I want you to do that because it creates a better world. All right. Mental health affects every aspect of our life, our relationships, our job. All right. And what I'm trying to do is build community here. Right. If we all are taking care of ourselves, we can actually offer advice to other people. So you're taking care of yourself, and then all of a sudden you had somebody follow my mental health checkup, right? And they come to you because you're a trusted individual in their life. And they come to you and they say, hey, I just did this mental health checkup and some of these things don't feel right. You're already in a good place to help that person. Then you're helping them. All right. And then you keep building the world, so to speak. You build a community of awareness. All right. And then all of a sudden we're improving relationships. To me, some of you have heard me say it before. Relationships is the key to everything. Think about it for a second, right? Relationships. You have healthy relationships with people, right? Your family members. Feels good, doesn't it? It feels like a safe haven when you go home instead of chaos because you don't have good relationships there. If you have good relationships at work, then all of a sudden, because how much time do we spend at work? Sometimes we spend, for people that work full time, you're spending more time around those people than you are your family, because all the awake hours you're around them. But think about those relationships are really good at work. Then all of a sudden, work is good, home is good. You have these other aspects, and relationships can also mean with yourself, that you know thyself. Then everything's working, right? Life is good, and you are enjoying life. You're enjoying your better self, which ultimately creates a better community. We all define community in different ways, but it could just be your family. It could be your immediate workplace, but it's betterment of that. So that's why I want you to do this, right? That's why I care about it. That's why we care about doing this podcast. And ultimately, we are breaking down stigma, whether you realize it or not. We're making mental health part of the everyday conversation and the everyday worldview. If we could just get people to realize that everyone has mental health, then that'd be the first step. There's a lot of people out there that will argue with me. It's like, oh, I don't have a mental health issue. I'm like, I didn't say a mental health issue. I didn't say a mental illness. I said mental health. And that's where I really challenge all of us to share that from here on out. We have physical health and mental health. And if you hear someone talking about physical health, say, how's your mental health going? How's your mood? That's what it's about. All right. So I am done preaching to you. All right. I was feeling good today. It's January 2nd, the start of a new year. I always say there's two starts to a year, the calendar year and the fiscal year. The calendar year is, of course, January 1st. Our fiscal year at work is July 1st. So I always kind of get to have two starting points throughout the year. So I try to give myself actually 2 mental health checkups during those times as well too. Those 2 components. So I encourage you guys to do that. I am proud of the work that St. Louis Counseling is doing. I am proud for those of you that have reached out, that have been in this podcast and have been talking about mental health, making it okay to talk about. I've had people reach out that have listened to the podcast. We are making strides, people. I am proud of what's going on here. So we can only grow it though, right? We can only grow community. We can only grow relationships. So next week we'll be back again, probably with a guest. It may not be as cool as this cool cucumber, Tommy D. I think I'm trying to create a alter ego maybe for podcasts. Like remember WKRP in Cincinnati had Dr. Johnny Fever. Maybe that's what I'm going with. I don't know. He was instrumental growing up for me, that show, and Venus Flytrap. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this is Tom Duff of Mental Health Matters.
This has been Mental Health Matters with Tom Duff of St. Louis Counseling Services. Check out stlouiscounseling.org for more information.